All right, it's the Improvisation Center back again with another video. This time this is just going to be some simple routine maintenance done on a daily driver vehicle we have that you've seen in a video before, and that is the Chevy Tracker, a little baby SUV. Well, this time we're going to do some suspension work, and that suspension work is going to be replacing the control arms, which includes the ball joints and the tie rod ends. We were going to replace the struts or shocks. They're really strut shocks, but they turn out to still be pretty good, so we're going to leave them alone. But we're going to focus on the removal of the control arms and the tie rod ends, and of course we're going to try to keep everything as straight as possible on the tie rod ends, so we could try to at least maintain as much of the original alignment as possible prior to still going and getting a front end alignment, because that's what you do to ensure that you are straight and true. So we already got the vehicle jacked up, got some safety here with a jack stand and a brick under it. For extra safety, we still left the jack in place. We did all this because we are on a graveled surface that's got soft ground underneath, and regular jack stands will not work here. So that's the setup we're using to help hold everything up for safety's sake. So get this camera set up and I shall get started. Alright, got a little batch of tools that we're going to be using for this job. Obviously you see the trusty sledgehammer, the baby sledgehammer. We also have a pair of pliers. I have a 17 and a 19 millimeter socket. Well, the 19 also translates to a 3/4 inch socket for those of you that have standard tools, and that's what that actually is, a 3/4, because the 19 I had is wore out, but that's neither here or there. So for all intents, 17, 19. 17 is going to be for this front control arm bolt and the tie rod end bolt right there. The 19 is going to be for the ball joint bolt right there and the rear control arm bolt. Well, it's there, trust me on that. We're going to take those loose so we can get the whole spindle assembly separated from the control arm and get the tie rod end separated from the control arm. The other thing is 14 millimeter for this little sway bar link right here. Need to get that loose just as well before having the control arm completely freed so we can remove it. And the thing is, because you see this giant spring right here, in order to do this, the first thing is going to be to separate the ball joint so I could lower the control arm down enough to be able to remove the spring without having everything just pop loose. So from there, after we get the control arm taken care of, then we move on to the tie rod end. We'll need the pliers to take these clamps off so we can get the boot off. Then we're going to use this little tool right here on the inner tie rod end. It clamps around the ball of the inner tie rod end, and use a 3/8 ratchet to turn the whole tie rod end assembly out of the rack and pinion assembly. And of course you do that in reverse to install the new setup. Now what I'm going to end up having to do is do some little measuring and all to ensure that when I put the new assembly together, because I will have to separate these two tie rod ends in order to get the boot off, or if our set has spare boots, even better, because then I could just put everything right back together and not even touch this stuff here. So we can probably come very close to getting the alignment straight. So either way, I'm gonna go ahead and start tearing stuff apart. Easy stuff off first. Always, you might need a little WD. Get stuff all greased up here. Ideally, probably want to put a wrench on here. That's a 14. So we're going to add a tool to that mixture. That's how some jobs end up being. You end up discovering that you might need one more tool. Alright, got the sway bar link removed. Put all that hardware back together. Quick and dirty. Since we have that loose, I can switch back to a 3/8 and finish it off. First, tap on the side of the knuckle that holds the tie rod in so we could pop it free. As you can see, tie rod is free. Now, the fun part, popping the ball joint free. And we're going to do the same thing. When all else fails and it don't want to separate like that, we pull out the forks. Which we got right here. Pulled away. Slowly lower the control arm down. Actually get this jack out of the way. As you can see, the spindle is separated. Push the control arm down with your foot and the spring is free. Now we go ahead and get everything else pulled free. Of course, as you can see, I'm putting a wrench on strictly by feel. You always want to try to avoid sliding underneath any vehicle on a jack if you can avoid it. It should be on there. All right. Okay, got that free. free. Go ahead, switch sockets. Get the front end here. Got 17 on there. Got that loose. Bolt free. Grip on there for some weird reason, but it is free. As you can see, got us a new control arm. Get this thing out of the bag. Got a new nut. New ball joint. Bushings. Everything is ready to go. And basically, we do everything in reverse. Simple thing. Quick and dirty. Of course, gonna have to put the spring back in. So we're gonna go ahead and get that going. Get some of the stuff out of the way. Try to make sure you get everything lined back up, even with the spring. There's little spots on the surface where the ends of the coil made up to. So you want to try to get all that together. And as you can see, all I got to do is just raise the control arm to make that a little bit easier. We're going to put our jack back under here. Get it situated. Get our spindle out of the way. And then slowly jack the thing up. This thing, the ball joint shaft is situated here. Got the ball joint shaft lined up with the hole in the spindle. I'm going to slowly lower it back down. And things will seat themselves, as you can see. Take all the weight off that ball joint. Control arm, I mean. Then get our jack out of the way. Get our new nut, put it on. Then let's see. In all actuality, we're going to try something different here. I'm going to see if we can go ahead and jack this thing back up again so we can put the impact on there and tighten it up that way, so we're not sitting here trying to torque things down with the breaker bar. So switch to our 22 millimeter. Get it on here. Get the damn bumblebee out of here. Little bastard. Shit. Gonna need to rustle up a deep 22 because the shallow is not cutting it. But in the meantime, what I will do is torque down all the other crap. Get the control arms fully situated so we can at least check that off the list. Back bolt done. Get a wrench on it. Front bolt done. Go ahead and put this little shitty sway bar link back on. Which again, like I said, I'm going to have to replace these next. But that will be on another day, since we don't have those at this moment. Alright, sway bar link done. Meantime, I'm going to go rustle up a deep 22 and get this ball joint taken care of. Some deep stuff. Bugs are getting on my nerves. Get this thing on here. Let's see if we can fit this under here now. Which, of course, doesn't always look like it's going to be the case. Yeah, got that snugged up. Now, go ahead and lower this down since this jack is shifting too much and I don't like that. Everything is held together like it needs to be. So, we're good on that. Okay, so now we're gonna need to go ahead and take this boot loose, kind of see where it goes to underneath, and this will be an episode where I'm sliding up underneath it. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get this started. This one, instead of using a regular clamp, actually uses one of these weird little compression, I don't know what the heck they're called, but clamps are typically used on ball joint and ball joint, CV axle boots. Usually have to pry these things loose. So this is where I get to go underneath. Where are you hiding? As you can see, this is what we got to deal with. So with that, throw a little WD on here, helping sliding this thing free. There we go. Pull the boot free. As you can see, you got the round knuckle of the inner tie rod in, and that's where we're going to put our clamp at. So we'll go ahead, get that started. Then go ahead and clamp it up around the ball joint knuckle. Not ball joint, tie rod in knuckle. Now, one thing you might want to do when you do this is position it in a way that allows you some swing with your ratchet. So when you go counterclockwise to unscrew the tie rod in free, you'll be able to at least get it a good ways before you bottom out. That's what we're doing right here. When I get this second nut on here, I'll go ahead and get it right where I need it to be. That way I can get this thing turned pretty free before I have to take the tool off. Now again, this is a 3/8 drive setup. The nuts on here are 14s or 9/16 if you're using standard sockets, which most people nowadays are not. Want to ensure this thing is pretty snug because you are on a smooth round surface. And this thing will spin off if you give it a chance. Also, on a side note, from what I could see, this inner ball joint is pretty weak. The outer still has a little bit of life, but the inner is weak. So yeah, we're changing them out. Now ideally, instead of using a ratchet, we're going to use a breaker bar underneath. But rules still apply as far as, now as you can see, it broke free pretty easily. So now, as you can see again, bottom out. So gonna have to take all that loose. Have to take all this stuff loose, reposition it if need be. And because it's where it's at, have to use a wrench in order to get these nuts free. And of course, it would want to start turning on its own. Might not need to do anything. Let's see if I could get this thing free. Get this shit off. As you can see, simple act of unscrewing the whole inner outer assembly free from the rack and pinion. Got her off. Make sure to save this little washer just in case one isn't included with the new stuff. I'm going to go ahead, get my tool back off. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the new assembly together. We can go ahead and get this part of the left side done. All right. Our new hardware did come with boots, so I did not have to even remove anything from the old setup, which means I can get everything as aligned as possible. As you can see, I already put everything together, outer tie rod in, newer tie rod in within this boot right here, the nuts on there, all that stuff. Go ahead, try to get everything aligned for the most part, and go ahead and snug everything down. Kind of see where the two outers meet at. This is where they say measure twice, cut once. Well, this is the same thing. It applies here. Get this. We actually have replacements of these, so that's not even needed either. More. Actually, let's go down a little. Double check here again. Go in a little. I think we got it on that end. So we're gonna go ahead, get this nut here situated so it won't turn anymore. Go ahead and put a wrench, a couple wrenches on that, get it nice and tight, and put this thing in. Got 2 wrenches on this tie rod end assembly. Just like with the other stuff, things are not the same. So I have a 19 on the outer tie rod end body, where it's got the slots to put a wrench, and the nut is a 22. So go ahead, get things snugged up, and I will say that thing is tight. So now go ahead and get this thing situated a little more. So go ahead and put our giant nut on there, our washer, and go ahead and screw this thing in place. Got our washer right here. Go ahead and do a little show and tell there. As you can see, there's little tabs on there. They fit into the thing in order to keep the washer stationary. So we're going to obviously have to manipulate things to keep that washer right where it needs to be as we tighten up the tie rod end. So I'm going to put this thing on. Go ahead and start tightening this thing up. Okay. Got it as snug as it's going to go on that end. Now, get our tool again. Same tool as before, but we're going to do the exact opposite this time. This time when we put it on, we're going to situate it near the top. That way, we'll have a good swing going back down clockwise. Now, let's go ahead and snug this thing down. Go ahead and put the breaker bar on there, finish it off. All right, that is tight. All right, got our tool off. Go go ahead, get this thing situated over the rack, and we're going to do a quick little tutorial on jerry-rigging stuff to apply to these types of applications where you don't have the proper clamps, tools, whatever. We're going to use zip ties for this thing. We're going to essentially do the same thing that the clamps did, except we're going to use zip ties, since this is not exactly a super critical area to be worrying about anchoring stuff. So in no lesser terms, we get our zip tie as snug as possible. Pliers. Snug the hell out of that thing. Snip the excess. And for all intents, we should be straight. Do the same thing here. And straight on that. I'm going to go ahead and put the tie rod end on. Take the nut off. Get our 19. Turn it. We're not messing up the alignment. We're just turning the inner tie rod end inside its own knuckle. So now, go ahead, turn this little number back. Get that little thing there straight, or as straight as I can. Get it in there, put the nut on. Let's see if this thing is the same 17. Of course not. Appears to be like it's 18. Yep, 18. Of course. Nothing's ever the same. Let's put our 18 on. Snug her down. We'll get the extension. Okay, looks like everything is straight. Surprisingly, they didn't give us no cotter pins, so I'll go and flush one out for my own stash to put on there. But in the end, this is what we got. Got a new control arm, new tie rod assembly, inner outer and the boot, new nut. Everything else is in place. We will still need a new sway bar link right there because that one is bad. The strut is still good, so we didn't change that out. But all in all, this thing is done. Put the tire back on, and we're going to move on to the other side. Now, I would waste your time watching me, having you watch me do the other side, but the other side is the exact same thing as this side, except it's on the right side, so I will spare you that. But if you have one of these little vehicles, even a two-door version, which seems to be in high demand nowadays, this will at least help you get a good rough idea of how to do the suspension work if you've never done it before. And even just looking at everything, you can clearly see what all is involved. to remove everything. It's really a pretty straightforward setup that I'm impressed with. So yeah, there you go. Especially if you get some aftermarket parts, be ready to have to interchange different size wrenches and sockets and all that stuff, as you clearly saw. So no big deal. The job's done on this side. I'm going to move on to the other side and get it all done. So until the next time, see you later. Safety first, and keep busy. Like my stuff so I can show up more and you can hear my monotone voice some more, or see what else that I'm up to around here. And subscribe if you hadn't already done so. So talk to you later.